It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. On today's show, we're going to be continuing our Supply Chain City series where we dive into a variety of supply chain stories with roots right here in Atlanta. But regardless where you live, work, or play, we're going to be offering news, ideas, best practices, some of the neatest stories taking place in the global world of end-to-end supply chain. Like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a variety of channels, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever else you get your podcasts from. As always, we would love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Let's thank all of our sponsors, those that allow us to bring this information and content to you. Verison, The Effective Syndicate, Vector Global Logistics, SupplyChainRealEstate.com, and many more. You can check out our sponsors on the show notes of this episode. Okay. It feels like Groundhog Day, but we're going to welcome, we're going to bring in my fearless co-hosts on today's show. First off, Ben Harris, Director of Supply Chain Ecosystem Expansion with the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Ben, how you doing?
Doing well, Scott. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Great to have you back. It's been a little while, but looking forward to kind of seeing what you've been up to, as well as you've got some great stories that I think will be interesting to our supply chain, our global supply chain audience.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
You bet. And Will Haraway, Founder, Chief Evangelist with Backbeat Marketing. Preacher Will, how you doing?
Hey, doing good, buddy.
Great to have you back. And you've been out west.
I did. I have been, yes.
Yeah.
Going out west where they appreciate me, as Warren Zevon would say.
You're big out west, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, so that's really where we want to start. You know, it's been at least a few weeks, or in some cases, a month or so since y'all were both in the studio and we were doing our Supply Chain City series. Let's give our audience an update of your recent adventures, and we'll start with you. So out west means what?
Yeah, went out to CSCMP, the annual conference. This year it was in Anaheim. It kind of goes in between Anaheim and Nashville and Orlando and Chicago and Atlanta. And this year was in Anaheim, right in the shadow of Disneyland. But it's honestly my favorite supply chain conference to go to of all of them, and it's because it's so. It's just, much like ourselves in Supply Chain City and our podcast, Supply Chain Now Radio, it's so focused on that particular segment. It really is sort of like Old Home Week in a way. You see people that, that I've worked with going back to, my first, dealings with Manhattan Associates and on, so it's fun you get industry analysts, you get media, you get pretty much every player you can think of. And I would say that over the years, the infusion of the new digital freight companies, particularly Uber Freight and Convoy. I know we had Kirsten in here, about a month ago. I didn't see her there, but I saw a lot of the guys on her team.
She is an incredible speaker.
And she's phenomenal.
Maybe
sure
she should keynote next year.
I just didn't find her, but that infusion of youth and enthusiasm has really helped that conference and probably a lot of these conferences, honestly, because it's sort of pushing like the C.H. Robinsons in the world. They have sort of updated their marketing and their messaging to let people know, like, hey, we can do this stuff too. We're not just because we're the old warhorse in the industry. But it was inspiring and great, and we had a number of clients there, and it was obviously the weather was gorgeous, and they did a really good job with it. And saw Dave Maddox, hung out with him quite a bit at the food truck deal,
people.
And
He's good people.
Yeah, he was great.
For our listeners, Dave Maddox leads the Atlanta chapter of the CSCMP Roundtable. He's been president now probably for 3 or 4 years, and he is great people. They're doing some really neat things here in Metro Atlanta. And Will, I don't have the dates in front of me, but I think we've got some key takeaway interviews set up in the next few weeks, right?
Yeah. Here next Wednesday, we're going to talk to 4 different companies that were at see a CMP and kind of get their sights and sounds, because it's one thing for me to say it, it's another thing to hear from companies that were presenting and get an idea of, certainly some of the conversations they had, some of the sales activity they had, some of the media. So we're going to talk to Archer Hub, which is a new asset-based digital freight forwarder along the, sort of a competitor with Convoy. So that'll be interesting to get their perspective. They actually launched there. We'll talk to our friends Resilience 360. They were on hand. It's actually really cool because that company in particular is great to show. It shows well because they put up a big screen and it shows all the disruptions that are happening in the world at any given time. And at the time it was the whatever that was 3 weeks ago, the Humberto was sort of bearing down as the latest hurricane on the in the Caribbean, and so you could see it and where they were predicting it to go, and with it and how it was affecting different industries, but you could see it on the screen, and I think just visualizing that was pretty interesting for attendees. But talking to them and then talking to Blue Jay, another one of the supply chain transportation companies. And we'll be talking to them too. So it's going to be fun. I'm glad we're able to do that. It'll be a kind of a CSCMP recap, sights and sounds kind of thing.
Second helping.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff. Well, all right, Ben. So Will's been busy these last 3 or 4 weeks for sure. How about yourself?
Yeah, I actually was up in Boston at the AdvaMed. They do a med tech conference. They do several different conferences, but this is one of their largest and really devoted specifically to medtech and really that industry and to be even more specific, it's more so on the medical device side, which of course, as we know from a supply chain standpoint, it's the entire conference. You don't go expecting it to be a supply chain show. You think about what all goes on in healthcare and medical device and so forth. But really, I think supply chain was at the center of almost everything at the show. And I must have talked to every piece of the supply chain there as far as stakeholders and so forth. And it was just really interesting to talk about, from the idea. You had a lot of different, venture capitalists out there, a lot of companies that were venture capital backed and so forth. They're looking for additional funding, different series and so forth. And just to look at their products and actually to experience, some of their products. And then, they had a lot of questions about, how do we get to market on that stuff? And that's what was really interesting, is taking it from the idea to actually putting together the product itself, but then also actually getting it in the consumer's hands to actually help them. And really, it was just amazing to see the amount of resources that are devoted to medtech like that for the supply chain. And it was really mind-blowing to me just how many companies were out there. And there are a lot of companies that were represented that have a big presence in Georgia. Also, ResMed was out there. His CEO, had a great conversation with him. They've got a pretty big manufacturing distribution operation here in Metro Atlanta. And then a couple other companies, Stryker, which you guys might know from your knee replacements and your hip replacements and so forth. I mean, they're it, when it comes to that. And they had one of the guys there actually just made a big investment in an innovation hub here in Atlanta with Emory. So really excited for them to talk about that on a stage in front of 100+ people.
They have a very sophisticated supply chain, Stryker does.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. I think they were a Manhattan Associates customer at one point. I guess they still are. But yeah, really a lot of fun companies that were out there. And it was just great to talk about, from contract research organizations, or CROs as they're called, all the way up to, people that they're doing door deliveries like your UPSs and your FedEx. I actually didn't have a good FedEx contact until last week, on the healthcare side. So I made a really good connection with their VP of healthcare there. So
nice.
Great conference overall.
I've exchanged a couple notes with one of the other big carriers in their healthcare division. We don't talk enough about the healthcare supply chain. We'll have to book a future episode where we dive in deeper on that, because that like every different sector supply chain, there's some uniqueness about the healthcare supply chain that probably doesn't get enough visibility.
Or you could just come to my panel discussion tomorrow at Georgia Bios.
Look at that.
That was so smooth, Ben.
For those of you listening, that was not set up intentionally. Actually, I know we've been talking about summit that has been coming up for a while now. As far as things that upcoming events that we talk about. But yeah, tomorrow is finally the day for Georgia Bio Summit. So we're doing a little panel discussion actually on Georgia Assets is what we're calling it.
Okay.
It's really more about the supply chain stakeholders within the industry. So I think we should do a little redux maybe, and maybe invite some of those guests back here, and we could do our own session, talk about that.
Let's do it. We'll make that happen. We've already got some dates booked for November and December for the Supply Chain City series. Maybe we'll add some bonus episodes. Great topics. Okay, so the other news that I know we're all aware of, that we're all excited about, we continue to get kind of build the engine for the 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards.
Yes, sir.
It's been a long work in progress. All right, we're trying to capitalize on the momentum and the success in the first year. Right.
Yeah.
Which was just
it was a great year. Yeah, it seemed like it just happened.
Right, but we're in position now this week to be publishing a new website, kind of a new brand, a new positioning of the event. We're going a little bit bigger. We're adding more room. We sold out of seats last year, so we're adding a little more room. We've got a new partner with Modex 2020, which will be serving as our host. We've got some new award categories, including a Reverse Logistics Excellence Award. We've already confirmed that the Reverse Logistics Association will be a partner once again. Tony Scirotta, that's right. And talk about components of the end-to-end supply chain that doesn't get enough visibility. At return side and reverse logistics, we're doing our best to spotlight that component more and more. And Ben, we've got, thanks to you and the Metro Atlanta Chamber, we've got two exceptional participants between a keynote and an MC. So tell us more about those.
Yeah, so actually was it yesterday, Scott, that we confirmed Shan Cooper, who's actually with the Atlanta Center for Progress. Did I get that right?
Atlanta Committee for Progress.
Atlanta Committee for Progress. Thank you, sir. And she was actually formerly with Westrock. I think she was like vice president there of transformation for them for a little while, and had a couple different supply chain related roles even previous to that. So extremely excited about Shan joining us. She's a phenomenal speaker. Been a friend of the chamber for a long time. I have not had the pleasure of meeting Shan directly yet, so I'm really looking forward. I think we're going to take her to lunch here soon enough, Scott, and get to know her a little bit better before that. So yeah, we are very excited about confirming her. Then we also have one other guest.
Let me butt in for just a second.
Go ahead.
So not only was Shan the Chief Transformation Officer at Westrock, but prior to that, where she first hit my radar, no pun intended, where she's led as a senior executive Lockheed Martin's facility, right up the road, where they manufacture the Hercules, which is the longest running military aircraft aviation product line in history here in the States. So great speaker. What a rich background that she has in supply chain, manufacturing, you name it. So to get her, and she's also doing some neat things with her current role, where she's serving as the executive director with the Atlanta Committee for Progress, which is helping to make business happen here in Metro Atlanta. So excited about that. Sorry I had to. This was our latest breaking development, and ever since that came across email over the weekend, that's really just been it's made us all really excited, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's not our only other speaker that we just confirmed. Also, we've got one other from pretty big, lofty position over at GP. Yes. I'm not going to steal your thunder, Sky, but I'll let you make the announcement.
Oh, appreciate that. Christian Fisher, President and CEO with Georgia Pacific LLC. Really excited about Christian joining us as keynote. We saw, of course, Christian was a keynote during the 2018 Georgia Logistics Summit and was well received as probably one of many presentations he's been asked to make over the years. But great story. If we're going to celebrate the Metro Atlanta end-to-end supply chain successes, it's outstanding to partner with some iconic brands that are headquartered right here in the city. So to have Christian Fisher, the fearless leader of Georgia Pacific, join us as keynote, and Shan Cooper, what two big names to get to that our audience will be looking forward to hearing from.
Yeah, and I was going to say, in addition to your comments too, Scott, it really complements well what we did last year around content. We talked about the fireside chat with Kevin Heath, of course, the Chief Procurement Officer for GP, and also the leader who has started the Point A Center for Supply Chain Innovation. So we were lucky enough to have Kevin last year, and also Daria Faruqi. That was kind of an audible we called there.
Yes.
Had Daria kind of stand up, and I think that was one of the highlights of the entire program, was having her as well. She is now, for your listeners out there who don't know Daria Faruqi is the president of the Point A Center for Supply Chain Innovation. So that was one of our big key themes last year around innovation. So we're very excited to have them back, and we're going to be talking about another fun announcement also that we'll tease now. I don't want to steal thunder, but there should be a pretty big announcement for around GP actually at the event. So stay tuned for more details on that.
Outstanding. So big thanks to Shan and Christian and their teams, of course, for joining forces on our 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. And of course, we're great to partner with Backbeat Marketing. It's big part of the effort, and the reason that we founded this initiative in the first place is to spotlight and amplify all the different people and companies and technologies and innovations that are the story here, right, in the supply chain city. So looking forward to that, March 10th, 2020, and registration, nominations, everything will be opening in the next few days.
Be here before you know it.
It sure will. Okay, so moving right along, we could talk about that until the cows come home. I'm sure our listeners are ready to move on.
Registration is not open, but hey, go ahead and mark your calendars.
That's right, March 10th. Yeah. All right, so let's get to the red meat of today's podcast and today's episode. And it's always great to have Will. Will, I think you're an economist at heart.
I guess so.
You've got your finger on the pulse when it comes to trade and tariffs, and let's dive into some updates there.
Yeah, the latest is that the United States and Japan agreed to a limited free trade agreement last, let's see, on the 25th. So it's been a couple weeks, actually, but we hadn't touched on it yet. So we're reducing tariffs on 42 different lines for over $40 million of agricultural imports, both coming to Japan from us and from Japan here, and that's going to eliminate some of the pressures on farmers in both countries. It was really just we know that in the U.S. it's ethanol, beef and pork, wheat and barley, wine, soybeans that will now receive preferential tariff access. And so that's helpful to those guys. They have really been squeezed this year as far as finding profits due to some of these pressures. It's one of the many stories that I don't think we've touched on the farmers yet, but those are one of the many stories that have been affected by this trade war that's been going on. And there's the other thing is that they have lifted really the threat of auto tariffs, which was a major a major sticking point, obviously, for Japan, considering just how much business they do here in America. And the plan was, well, we want to, we want to see a little tit for tat back and forth, back into Japan. But they've agreed to table those discussions for now. So so good news for the farmers and for the auto industry for both countries.
It was great. There's so much going on. I was talking with Albert Sorto, who's going to be leading a panel this Wednesday at the Georgia Manufacturing Summit on global trade and tariffs and some of the things going on there. But, while there is plenty of negativity and issues that are slowing business down, there's still a lot of really neat stories and progressive collaboration that's going on in light of this trade war.
Yeah.
We need more certainty, right? We need to get some of these issues settled, right?
Yes, for sure. But what's interesting, just along what you're saying, is that it is causing people to take a deeper look on how to be more efficient and how to find more profits within their company, like within agricultural. Just to touch on that specifically, there are companies like Native Ag Tech, up in Brooklyn, and what they do is they track when you plant a particular crop. They can track it from seed to sale. So it's awesome. So it just gives more visibility. It gives a grocery store, they understand where these crops are coming from, what they've gone through. Have they gone through any weird weather patterns? Have there been droughts? etc. Where exactly in the country it came from? How close is it to me? Those so. It's bringing some of the supply chain stuff that we talk about all the time with the consumer products, but bringing it, seed to sale to the agricultural community, which again is hasn't had to be as sophisticated with this type of data until sort of in this way being forced to look at some different ways to try and find some efficiencies. Driving
innovation and trying to capture efficiencies however we can in this complex global market, which has some wins taking place that we hope are settled soon. Speaking of companies that are getting creative in light of some of the complexity of doing global business. Will, I know one of the companies that's been on your radar is Bed Bath & Beyond, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, again, I think this is exactly what we're talking about. You're looking at a company that, Bed Bath & Beyond, they're looking to cut $1 billion in inventory out of their supply chain. And they're closing, what was it? I believe it was 60 stores.
Initially, I think they were planning for 40, and they've upped that to 60.
Right. And they're going to do that within the next 18 months. They already reported $194 million write down in the second quarter. So, but they're looking to become more lean, more efficient, use the stores that they have as distribution centers. A lot of the things that we've talked about on the show here in the past. I mean, this is, again, just you're looking at a company that's pulling out all the stops to use technology to find some different ways to be successful. Yeah,
and I think I saw that article in Supply Chain Dive. Speaking of technology, they referenced something called, and Malcolm would have to shoot us a note, like a markdown optimization package.
Sure.
that they were using to figure out how they can get rid of some of this dead inventory. What's the right markdowns? What's the right items to mark down? How much? These kind of factors that will help them get rid of some of this excess inventory.
That's right.
The other interesting thing about that story that I read was how they are, so much of their in-house brand is sourced indirectly. So there's a lot of middle companies, right? Intermediary aspects of their supply chain, and they're looking to procure that differently, which will, there's some huge margin opportunities. So, the devil's in the details. It's one thing to identify these opportunities and plan, build your game plan. But man, talk about the supply chain practitioners, part of the Bed Bath & Beyond team that are going to be executing on these huge, massive projects. A lot of work.
For sure.
That's a different kind of lean too. I mean, you got one thing, from an asset standpoint or stores and inventory, you got to get lean there for sure. But also from an operational standpoint with just pricing and margins. I mean, God, they're razor thin for retail as it is.
Right.
So if there's still some stuff that's kind of built in there that they haven't really taken advantage of, then that's a great place to start. So good for them for doing that.
And it looks like they're trying to do more importing as well, which is interesting because just like you said, with some of those, private label things, private label inventory that just sort of sits around, and becomes that excess inventory that they don't need, they can use importing to sort of mix and match and figure out to patch some of the holes and order as they need on demand.
To our listeners, whether you're listening to this live or you're listening to this on the replay, if you're working at a company, retail or otherwise, and you all have kicked off some creative ways of finding efficiencies here, as we are in the last few months of 2019, shoot us a note. We'd love to talk shop with you.
Please
connect at supplychainnowradio.com. We'd love to kind of see what other teams are doing. Every company doesn't have their plan published like Bed Bath & Beyond has had here, but it's a tough time for a lot of folks in the global business environment. Okay, so that was the Bed Bath & Beyond, and we should give a shout out to Supply Chain Dive. Great stories. They've got their finger on the pulse over there. All right, so Ben, let's bring you back into the conversation. Let's talk about UPS and some big news that came out this past week or so.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be living under a rock at this point to not hear about this the stuff with UPS. They just secured a milestone FAA approval for drone deliveries just now. So they received FAA Part 135 certification, which allows the company to deliver goods anywhere in the country, beyond line of sight and at night. So using Matternet's drones and operating as a drone airline, quote unquote, UPS is now permitted to operate an unlimited amount of drones with an unlimited number of remote operators. So the unlimited being the key word there. That's the big difference for sure here. So really big deal for them. And I think, it's one of those things where there's all these different startup companies that have been in the drone space for a long time, especially Silicon Valley, and everybody's got this cool idea for a drone. They're kind of, operating them, one off here, one off there, and which is great. But, it's almost like you got the big kids come to the table now. And that's when you see big change when it comes to policy, is when companies like UPS take notice, and they can really throw their weight around to get things like this actually done. So hats off to them, for being, in the space early on, working with folks at the FAA to get this done. I mean, it's one thing to engage them later in the process, but they're talking about at the design level. They've been instrumental in the process of from day one with UPS, and that's the reason you're seeing this certification at this point.
That's another. Now that we've got the green light, right, for takeoff, it'll be really interesting to see how this goes into action. So we'll stay tuned. We'll have to do a follow-up report on this really big news and how it continues to push the envelope on Industry 4.0, which is happening right now. It's been happening. So looking forward to seeing what UPS does with this clearance. Now, staying in the shipping space,
the parcel space.
The parcel space. There we go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about DHL, Ben.
Well, and as we talked about, big mergers and big changes, and also companies announcing big changes. Some companies don't do that, but to Will's point earlier, at Bed Bath & Beyond, the way they did. What used to be DHL, which is now DHL after their merger with DP World, they unveiled that they are going to spend 2 billion euros in digitization investments or digitalization, right? I mean, everybody says one that's different. So yeah, shame on me for botching that. But so yeah, as part of a 6-year plan, DHL will deploy again 2 billion euros into warehouse automation tools, modernizing IT systems for them, routing optimization, Internet of Things, employee reskilling, and more. So big investment for them. It should be interesting. Of course, the details is what's very interesting there. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of comes to be and where they really make a lot of investments. Yeah. But good for them. I think there's just the amount of pressure on these companies to move quickly and to make big investments like this. I think it's a great move.
Yeah. Speaking of technology and logistics, one of the things we covered yesterday or this morning on the Supply Chain Buzz is Cowdy Logistics came out with a research piece that it did in partnership with a third-party research marketing firm, and they evaluated 13 different activities that go on in the logistics space, trying to figure out what's the right balance between technology and humans. And that ratio they came out, which their research supported, is 60-40. 60 on the technology side, but 40% of these activities really required, that hands-on, that human element, the expertise, the experience factor. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that story and how that research kind of is disseminated out in the industry and getting folks take. I think for some companies, especially with this level of investment we're seeing across the board, it might be 90% technology. I don't know. It seems like, for me, it seems like some of the problem solving, some of the putting out the fires that just is part of making supply chain happen. Not that there's not of course there's a technology play there, but I think that's where I'm seeing that strong need for human leadership, human interaction. Any thoughts?
I was going to say that, I mean, it's for things that are, it's always the automation versus, kind of AI type trade-off that you have there. If you got things that you still need people to make choices. There's decision-making machines out there that if it's programmed to do one way, and it'll adapt to make different decisions based on certain things. But at the end of the day, you still need humans to do certain things also. That's why a lot of there's material handling equipment. We talk about cobots and things like that. That's the reason they are cobots. It's because they assist humans in that way. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot more investment is in the cobot space as opposed to just straight automation when it comes to that.
Will, any other thoughts there?
I mean, you're seing that here in Atlanta, as well with our friends of the show Gray Orange. They have technology that runs both of those gamuts as far as the cobots and the actual robots. So that's just to bring it back to one of our own. Yeah.
Well, or if you're operating a drone, that was part of the announcement with UPS is the drone operators themselves also in remote locations. So while they're not inside the drone themselves, they're inside somewhere controlling that. So I mean, it's just going to be a reskilling, if you will, of what people are doing and how they're doing it. And you'll see some of those other much more menial tasks kind of go away. And that's where I think robots and automation can really help.
Yep. So we didn't really focus on this in the pre-show, but I know one of the things we want to talk about today is the cannabis supply chain. And I think we were talking about a recent article Steve Banker came out with, right, on the cannabis supply chain. Do we want to dive into that now? On any we want to cover this now? I'm throwing you on a curveball.
I'm game.
Hey, it's the Braves cards game 4.
Speaking of curveballs, right? That's right.
But you know what's funny, and Will, I'm not dwelling on your misery. We've been there. The Braves hadn't won a playoff series since 2001. So
that's right.
I like your chances with being a Cardinals fan right now, Will. So yeah, we'll be lucky if I also, well, you also admitted that we're just the better team.
You are
being the Atlanta Braves, but you know what? Better team doesn't always win.
We are us, but we have the postseason history, man. It always happens.
So.
We could go deep.
You know, it's funny because earlier we were talking
chomping at the bit too.
I know we were talking about. I know I'm dying to talk sports right now too, but you know. Talking about marijuana is not all that bad either. So.
All right. So we'll see. What's funny about this is, you know, we'll produce this and publish this episode, a week and a half from now. And one of us is going to be, either false hope or, hey, the best is yet to come. Who knows how it plays out. I wish I had a crystal ball. But nevertheless, what an incredible couple of three games.
They've been great.
Late inning, late game heroics, games. And we'll see what happens.
They've been heart wrenching and torturous, but if you're not if you're not like died into it, if you're just a baseball fan, they're just great baseball games.
Oh yeah, I mean, just the playoffs is just a different level of detail, and it's true coaching that goes on in the playoffs. And the season, you can kind of have some of those games. You're like, you know what, that didn't really work out too well. We'll just get them next time.
We get them tomorrow.
It's not like that in the playoffs.
Not like that today, at least for the Cards. Can't get them tomorrow. You got to get them today.
That's right.
Hey, we'll see what happens. All right, so let's use this last segment of our episode here, and let's talk about the marijuana supply chain, the cannabis supply chain. It's blowing up, right? And we're seeing regulations ease up a little bit. We've covered that on past shows. We've seen an industry that is seeking out and hiring some outstanding supply chain talent, right? As the business prospects of growing a business in this specific industry really you are getting much more optimistic, right?
Yeah.
So Steve Banker came out with this Forbes article entitled "The Marijuana Supply Chain Is Home Delivery Next." So let's get some initial thoughts on this article and the industry. And who would like to go first?
Well, I think there's some challenges to start with, with marijuana. And first of all, it's still illegal from a federal standpoint. So that creates a little bit of problems, when you start moving things across state lines.
Right.
You got the Commerce Commission and whoever else that says you can't do that.
Right.
Exactly. So, and any time, in Colorado or California or wherever, the feds can go in there and just bust these guys up almost any time. I mean, some things don't hold necessarily, but it's still there's disruption that causes doubt and disruption. So
what's interesting, some of the back channel confidential conversations I've had with these national firms that are in this industry is as they hire practical, no nonsense supply chain talent, they're ready to make stuff happen. Mm-hmm. But some of the regulations that still exist, they can't, you can't get a LTL shipment from Mexico or New Mexico to South Carolina.
Yeah,
it's not that you gotta figure your way through it. So it's really interesting to see the kind of old school make it happen supply chain expertise with this industry that's got so many nuances right now still.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, this is a blessing and a curse for marijuana, folks in the marijuana trade and industry, is that, unlike fruits and vegetables, there's really, marijuana can be grown year round in a controlled environment. So there really is no peak season per se, like you would have, with the fruit and vegetable trade. a lot of the time, where you have kind of the season and you know when it's coming and so forth. But that makes things tough from a supply and demand.
Except for when Fish is on tour.
Yeah, that's true.
Huge spike, demand planning. All right, so Will, I know you're dying to weigh in here, but
dying to make many jokes.
Yeah. What's your take? Give us some.
Well, it's funny that you were talking about the as supply chain professionals are coming into the space, it's still a relatively unsophisticated methods that are being used. I mean, there's people are still using faxes, to help move shipments and make forecasting predictions. And but you're obviously going to see that. One of the things I found interesting was there's a company called the Salesforce.com of bud, or of weed, whatever you want to nomenclature.
What's the name of the company?
They're called LeafLink.
LeafLink. I like that.
Get it there, Scott? Leaf.
I'm usually so slow on the group. Is that what you're saying? No, I'm with you.
Well, and it's basically just a CRM for weed companies. And all the things that you're talking about,
specialized,
with the pull downs that have to do with the fact that, different regulations for different states, and where you can ship and where you can't, and how you can ship it, and how you check for
permitting.
Yeah.
Vary state by state, obviously.
So I think that's really interesting that you see somebody like literally tailor, but you've seen it across every industry, so it makes total sense. It's just you got maybe just because it's marijuana, it makes it a little bit more high profile when these things happen, and a little funny. Nothing like LeafLink. That's not a bad name for a company in the marijuana space.
So let's get to Steve's question here. Home delivery, is that on the immediate horizon? What do we think? If you had to look deep into your crystal ball, Ben, is this what's around the corner?
I think it's going to take a little while. I mean, you look at home delivery right now, and you've got companies that are trying to do it right now, like an Instacart and so forth, and they're doing okay. They're not making money hand over fist, but they're doing pretty well in the space. But a lot of times, people are more opportunistic when they buy things like that. Like I think Steve talked about, if we had to compare an industry with the marijuana trade, he talked about alcohol.
Right.
And, a lot of people don't just go, I'd like a 12-pack delivered to my house, per se. They usually just go get it. That's one of those things. You just go to the grocery store, the liquor store, and you go purchase it. And that's how it works right now with dispensaries.
So that's working in Colorado, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, what would you had a great stat as far as the amount of dispensaries.
There are 3 times as many dispensaries in Colorado as there are Starbucks.
Wow.
That is it's easy to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
In terms of, because that everyone can drive from, think of your neighborhood and how many Starbucks you pass, especially in a city like Atlanta.
Yeah.
That is an amazing stat.
Yep.
Holy cow.
They usually have a dispensary like right next to the Dunkin' Donuts too. I've noticed. I don't know why that would be, but
the Rockies
they put them right next to each other.
Have been struggling so bad, maybe, huh?
You think? Could be.
I don't know. Maybe it enhances performance.
It could be. We're going to learn all kinds of things in the future here.
Oh gosh,
nice ballpark over there, though.
It is. It sure is. All right. So, any other thoughts when it comes to standing up the industry, when it comes to the legality and
I was going to say, we talked about, kind of market drivers that can negatively affect the market too, is you've got the black market is still out there also. So we're talking about legally trading marijuana right now, the legal market for it, but the black market's always going to be there also. And it's actually pretty profitable. I think I had actually heard in Canada, when they announced that nationwide that it was basically legal all in one day. I was actually in Toronto at the time when they made the announcement. I didn't partake per se, but I thought it was fun just to be there. And
you passed on the grass?
Yeah, I did pass on the grass that day. But it was interesting just to see, what would happen basically once it does, especially when it's something we talk about overnight, a big change like that. I mean, that is a huge shock to supply and demand for a place. So for an entire country of that size to just say, oh yeah.
That's so Canada too. They're just like, hey, go right ahead. You can do it. That's a really bad
I was
Canadian.
going to say, is that your Canadian accent?
Maybe it's really poor.
But yeah, but I think that the tendency there though was still the black market was still, even though it's literally legal there, but yet the black market is what dominates that market. Which is just fascinating to me. That I thought you think that people would be like, oh, I can just go get it for legally down the road at a dispensary, but they can still get it cheaper and easier on the black market.
Right. They've still got that one cousin.
Yeah.
So, speaking of legal, marijuana currently, as Steve cites in his article, fully legal in 11 states plus Washington, D.C. But also, he mentioned CBD oil, which is sold in 28 states. I think that the latter, CBD oil,
including Georgia now.
Including here.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about on this show in previous episodes. I've had some, I don't know about y'all, but I've had some folks I know well that have really used some of the cannabis treatments, especially with epileptic conditions for their children, right? And up until recently, I don't think you could get that in Georgia. So folks were moving to different states. I think that is one wrinkle in all of this, or not wrinkle, but one aspect of all of this that I think a lot of folks, maybe, for certainly it wasn't on my radar until I kind of had these personal interactions. I think that is this really important topic that most folks may not think about when they think of the legalization or the deregulation of the marijuana industry.
Right.
There's some really, beyond the where most people's minds go to, which is a recreational use, maybe. There are some serious applications for related products that, especially with
very positive, life changing and
mental
in good
health,
ways,
emotional support. I mean, there are a number of different applications beyond just the straight medical ones.
That's right.
That those factors are going to have to be considered.
Yep. No, that's a very good point there, Scott. And I think that's why you see 28 states as opposed to 11 that have more into the CBD and the things that are, really, really have a true, profound, effect on people's lives. And that's what's been really exciting about, some of the efforts there.
So do you think that Native Ag Tech, was that the name of the company? Is it? Do you see an application where they're going to be tracking, in this industry, seed to sell?
Not that's not in their plan now, but I could see it becoming. Because obviously it's a profitable industry,
sure,
and companies continue to grow. But I think they're dealing with the just tomatoes and such at the moment.
Easier stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, any final thoughts on the cannabis supply chain, marijuana supply chain? And there's some local players, right? Did we touch on some local players, Ben?
We didn't. We have in previous episodes of Supply Chain City here. So we, Certera Wellness, actually, who, I don't know if Malcolm can do this quickly, but they just changed their company name, actually, as of today. I went to their website earlier and I looked at just the About Us section, thinking, okay, if I could just give an overview of Certera Wellness, kind of what they do. But they manufacture and produce wellness products when it comes to marijuana, mostly CBD products and so forth. And so forth. But yeah, they just changed their name today to Parallel.
Hey, high five to Malcolm. But Parallel's a new brand name.
Pioneering Well-Being is their business there. So that's exciting. And they're based right here in Atlanta. They've been extremely aggressive about putting together a phenomenal group of leaders and some supply chain leaders in that area also. And I know they work with another Atlanta-based company here, Flourish, I believe, that we've mentioned about previously on the show. Also, Colton Griffin. Yeah, our good friend there, who's a former Manhattan associate employee as well. He's been working there for a long time, and he started that company, and he's actually, of course, spends a lot of his time in the California area now, of course, because the industry is just much more mature, you would say, out there. But yeah, they're both of those companies are still based here, and they're huge as far as dominating the Southeast in that arena.
Well, the Flourish, and y'all both know much more about supply chain software than I do, but that platform was built specifically for the cannabis industry, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So let's, as we wrap up here today on the latest Supply Chain City episode, here on Supply Chain Now Radio, which is neat to have the gang back together. We've got some great shows.
Yes, sir.
In November, we're going to have a special guest from Stored.
Yes, Sean Henry,
Oh,
CEO.
Sean, we haven't had him on in
It's been a long time.
about a year, probably.
That's right.
Yeah.
So looking forward to, Stored has been rocking and rolling through a number of different ways. So looking forward to him being on the show in November. And then we'll have a special guest in early December as well, which we're going to keep under wraps for now. But let's get we got to circle back to baseball, right? We got game time not too far from here is game 4 of the NLDS. And what's your fearless prediction? Game 4.
Oh, I mean, I like the Cardinals to win, man, and force a game 5. Not only because I have tickets tomorrow, Wednesday night. I'll tell you that much.
Give us a score.
Yeah, give us a score.
Oh, today, well, the Cardinals still can't hit at all, so we'll go.
We got Dallas Keuchel on 3 days rest now?
But I think that he doesn't do that very often, and people, when they push guys like this, it doesn't always work out. I'm sure they'll have a quick hook for him because it's the playoffs, but we'll go with something like 5-3.
5-3 Cards.
That's
right?
my prediction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ben.
I think the Cardinals win today too. I know it sounds bad, Scott, but I'm thinking 4-2.
Okay, 4-2.
Low scoring playoff games. That's
All
what
right.
we've had so far.
All right, so here I'm going to be the pattern interrupt. Then I think there's so much momentum, and baseball is not like football and some other games. Momentum's tougher. However, I think the Braves are going to come out and they're going to score a bunch of runs. I think last night
we close them out.
I'll tell you, honestly, watch in the first inning Dakota Hudson. He's a sinker baller for the Cardinals, and a
lot of ground balls.
That's the idea, but he has had trouble with his command on that sinker lately, and in the last few of his September outings, he has walked several guys. He's gotten out of it a lot of times, but you may see like a bases loaded 1-out situation, and the game will turn right there.
Is he a righty or a lefty?
He is a righty. Mississippi State Bulldog.
That helps for our got a lot of lefties.
Yeah. He's a right-hander, but he throws ground balls. That's his thing.
8-4 Braves.
8-4 Braves. Okay.
I would love that outcome.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap up today on just a few upcoming events. As always, we want to invite our audience come check us out in person. We've got some really neat events that we're currently scheduled for, and a few that we're adding to the schedule here in the next few weeks. But for starters, here on October 9th, just 2 days down the road here, on Wednesday, the Georgia Manufacturing Summit, put on by our friends over at the Georgia Manufacturing Alliance. We're going to be leading a panel session, broadcasting live. Greg White will be leading a couple of on-site interviews there. Jason Moss, CEO of the GMA, he's got some great keynotes from P&G and Kia. So looking forward to that event. Will both of y'all be there?
I will be there. Yes.
Fantastic. Will?
I don't know if I will be there.
It's on we gotta get on your radar.
Is it on my calendar? Did you put it on there already?
I might have.
I didn't know Scott was the keeper of your
Scott's
calendar.
in charge of me, if anybody was wondering, by the way.
Oh man, we're gonna. I bet you'll be there.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Registration's still open too, so check that out at GeorgiaManufacturingAlliance.com for a full day of manufacturing heavy content, which is going to be celebrating the 10,000 plus manufacturers that are here in the state of Georgia. Okay, and then October 23rd, we're going to be down in Charleston, where in partnership with the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness, we're going to be broadcasting live from the South Carolina Logistics Tech Talk. And you brought up DHL earlier. They're keynoting the event. DHL Supply Chain will be down there. We also are going to hear from Volvo Cars, which the first North American manufacturing site was established down in Charleston. They've got a pretty interesting story. But a great event. You can learn more at sccompetes.org, and definitely check us out in person. And then, have y'all been to Austin yet?
Texas?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's been a while.
Both y'all.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm the outlier. I have not been to Austin yet, and so we're going to be in Austin with our friends at EFT, November 7th and 8th at the 2019 Logistics CIO Forum.
You should add a couple days before or after, and just to kind of see the city for yourself too.
Well, we're going to be driving the van out there, so we're going to be adding probably a couple days on the front end, a couple days on the back end. But did y'all see the news with EFT here lately?
No, what you got?
I don't believe so.
So Reuters, right, the global media behemoth, has purchased for Transport. Is
that right?
I just found out this morning.
Did not know that.
And we have really proud of our partnership that we've established with the EFT folks, Nick and Asif.
Yeah.
And looking forward to this next event. But really, from by all accounts, it's going to be a perfect marriage that will help to continue to grow EFT's events.
Yeah, no, I think just when you bring the name Reuters to the table, I mean, that's a whole different level of, cachet, I think, to that event. So that's awesome, Scott. That's exciting.
Well, congrats to our friends at EFT and, of course, the Reuters folks. I think what an outstanding acquisition to further their chops in the global supply chain industry. And if you're interested in that event, the Logistics CIO Forum in Austin, registration is still open. You can check out our events tab at supplychainradio.com, or you can check out EFT.com and check out their events calendar. Okay, Reverse Logistics Association Conference and Expo in Vegas in February. I skipped everyone. We're going to be partnering with the Atlanta CSCMP chapter in January with one of their local events where they're going to be featuring one of the NASTRAC leaders. Are y'all familiar with NASTRAC?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
They're going to be giving an update on some of the things that organization's doing, of course, in conjunction with CSCMP. We're going to broadcast live from the event. Looking forward to interviewing a variety of their supporters and their board members, as well as we'll see. The NASTRAC presenter may kind of keep her presentation focused on the local audience, but nevertheless, I bet we connect and interview her as well. And you can Google that. Event is already open. It's on their registration calendar, so you can Google the Atlanta CSCMP organization to sign up and join us. So then the RLA Conference Expo out in Vegas in February 2020, and then, of course, MODEX 2020, where we're broadcasting live throughout the 4 days, and they're hosting our 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. So big. MODEX has been a great partner, and 35,000 people right here in Supply Chain City, one of the largest North American supply chain trade shows.
It's the largest in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow,
actually,
man, I gotta rework my verbiage.
MODEX, ProMat, same thing basically, but yeah, it is. It's a pretty big show.
Yeah,
so
huge show.
We're excited to have it here in Atlanta.
And the really cool thing about that show is it's free to attend.
Yeah,
MODEXshow.com to check it out. 4 days presentations. They have, as Greg likes to say, folks.
It's like why wouldn't you attend? If it's free like that too. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
folks will stand up there, many manufacturing production lines in there at the Georgia World Congress Center. So, an outstanding networking. So, if you're interested, check out MODEXshow.com. All right. What did we not cover today?
That was a lot.
It was a lot.
I was kind of impressed at how much we got done in
the
small amount of time. Yeah, so
the stamina, right? That's right. All right. So we've given the baseball predictions. Kidding aside, Will, we've all been there with some of the heartbreak losses. We were all pulling for a good game. It was a tough one. You were referring to Game 3.
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was a bad one, but good for y'all. There's always a flip side, right?
Always
There's somebody crying and somebody whooping.
Yes. All right. So let's give our listeners a chance. If they want to get in touch with you and what y'all have got going on at Backbeat Marketing, how do folks find you?
Yeah, backbeatmarketing.com.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
That easy.
Or just send me an email, william@backbeatmarketing.com.
Okay. And Ben, if they want to check in on all the cool things that the Metro Atlanta Chamber is up to, furthering and expanding business, but especially supply chain and then supply chain business in Georgia and in Metro Atlanta, how can they get in touch with you?
MetroAtlantaChamber.com. And then there's many places you can go from there, but I would start with that. And then always you can get me on my email, bharris@MACOC, as in Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce.com.
Okay. Great to have you both. Looking forward to the next episode with Sean and Stewart. That'll be an outstanding addition. Stewart is a really interesting company that's doing some big things.
Yeah.
And we added one more guest. Actually, that show, we got a guy from Hermias. The founder of Hermias is going to be on the show as well, AJ Piplica. And if you have not heard of Hermias, get ready, because it's definitely an interesting, really cool concept, and that has huge implications in supply chain. So
we have 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
We have to book a second hour for that episode.
It's going to be tough to get it all in, that's for sure. But you know what? That's why we do this. So
that's what we do.
It should be fun.
All right, so to our audience, be sure to check out other upcoming events, replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, all other leading sites where podcasts can be found. Be sure to check out us on YouTube as we're publishing our behind-the-scenes video of most of our podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. On behalf of the entire Supply Chain Now Radio team and the Supply Chain City gang, this is Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.